All righty. So we're going to go to 2 Timothy tonight. Yep.
What chapter?
Chapter 2.
Feels good to be back. I haven't been here in a while. I haven't feeling well. Fine, my foot's healed pretty good though.
Okay. All right. So from verse 19 through 23 is where we're going to, okay? He says, nevertheless, God's solid foundation stands firm, having this inscription: the Lord knows those who are His, and everyone who names the name of the Lord must turn away from unrighteousness. Now, in a large house, there are not only gold and silver bowls, but also those of wood and clay, some for honorable use, some for dishonorable. Some, if anyone purifies himself from anything dishonorable, he will be a special instrument, set apart, useful to the master, prepared for every good work. Flee from useful passions. Pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace, along with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. He says, but reject foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they breed quarrels. So, what we're going to talk about is that in a house, Paul uses this illustration. He says, if I was to walk into your house, and I would come in there. There would basically be like the front door. There might be a bowl where they would wash their feet. Okay, and then if I go on further into the house, there would be some other type of other type of bowls that were there for certain purposes. Then if I go a little bit further to where I'd sit down and eat, then there may be some other bowls that I would eat in. There might be some other bowls that might be made out of gold or silver or wood or whatever. But each one of those bowls would be made out of a separate material, but used for something different. And so what he was saying is that when you look at these bowls, there are certain bowls that kind of they're good for honor, other are for dishonor, like a dirty bowl or something. Other are there, like if you want to eat out of it or something, it's good for you. And so what Paul is going to talk about here when we start talking about this is this: that each and every one of us are some type of a vessel, a different type of bowl. That God has created each and every one of us different in that capacity. We're not, it's like if you were to go into a store and you wanted to get some storage bowls, you really don't want to buy every one of them the same. You might want to buy some that are small, that might have 1 cup and another 2 cup. You might get you might get a quart. You might get something that might handle a couple quarts. You might get a 9x12, baking thing or whatever, because each one of those are going to be different, and you're going to do something with it. And so what Paul is doing here is, he never walked with Christ, okay? Paul came along and was chosen as an apostle after Jesus had died. But Paul does the same thing that Jesus did, and that was he uses illustrations in order to get his point across.
You said Paul never walked with Jesus. Didn't Jesus teach him?
No.
What are you supposed to do?
Because Jesus had already died before Paul was chosen. He came after the fact. He was the one that took Judas's place. And so he came around. He came about 2 or 3 years after Jesus had died, and because he was out there persecuting Christians and stuff. And so what happens is that with us as a vessel, that what God wants us to do is He wants us always to be usable. Hey, Phyllis. And so what Paul, when you look at what he says, he says, now there are these things that are in a large house or a great house. And so what Paul is saying to us is this: as children of God, when you start talking about, we always talk about the house of God being a church, okay? But in this illustration, he's not using it as a church. He's using it basically as God has this house, and in this house, every one of us are a vessel. And so what he wants is every one of us to be usable. Now, think. I was cleaning out the basement the last couple of weeks, and we've been in this house since 2007. That's 12 years, and we still have boxes of stuff that had never been unpacked. And so I'm going through these boxes, and I'm finding Tupperware stuff, and I'm finding all kinds of bowls. And it's like, okay, do you want to keep these bowls? And I'm thinking, why do I want to keep the bowls? And why do I want to keep the other stuff? Because every cabinet is already filled. And I've got some shelving over there in the kitchen area, and all of that is filled. With all kinds of storage bowls and everything else. And I'm thinking, there is no sense. To me, that bowl is it's useless. It's not really providing anything. And this is what Paul was talking about. He says, in this house, that is God's house, and we're bowls, vessels made out of different material for different purposes, that what God wants is for every one of us to be usable, to set aside for a certain purpose. You've got some bowls that you can use in a microwave. You've got some bowls that you can use in a microwave or in an oven. You've got other bowls that you can use in a microwave, oven, or refrigerator. Or you can even freeze stuff in them. But now there are some bowls that you've got that might be good for microwaving, but you don't dare put those things in the oven. There are others that you get great for storage, but you put them in a microwave, and that's going to be the end of them. Yeah. That's going to be the last time you're going to get to use that. And this is what Paul, in his illustration, is really trying to tell us, is that with every one of us being a certain type of bowl, that in the house of God, or in God's house, or God's working for all of us, He uses each one of us for a different purpose. We all don't have the same purpose. If you remember, Paul also used the illustration that we were all part of one body. Some would be a finger, some would be a toe, some might be an arm, and you take all of those parts together, and it makes one complete being to be able to focus and do what it is that God wants us to do. It's like you. How well do you think you would be able to do something, for instance, if you're missing your thumb? You try to hold something. Now, you might be able to hold it, but it becomes also very unsteady. You have to hold it a certain way. You can't use, like, for instance, if you were trying to write and you didn't have a thumb, you're almost going to have to write like this, and it's going to change the way that you do things. And so this is what Paul is trying to talk to us about in all of this. And he says that not only are you different vessels, again, just as there are different vessels in the house that are dictated and what kind of bowl or vessel that they are, dictated for what kind of use they are, you also don't place all of the bowls in one spot in the house. There might be some of the bowls that you might use in the bathroom. And there's some bowls that you're going to use in the kitchen. Others you might use in your living room or your family room or dining room. And so based upon the usage of the bowl is where you're going to place that bowl. And that's the same way that God uses us. Each of us have a selected purpose. And so each of us are therefore put in different places for Him to use. You can, I use the illustration, all the time. There are certain things that I can't do. If you wanted someone to draw a picture, you don't want to come to me, because my stick people don't even look good. They're weird. One's got a long arm and one's got a short arm, or they're lopsided in a leg, or and it's like I never was good at drawing. Now there are other people that are great at drawing, very artistic. Some can do very, very great at writing. Others are very good at speaking. Others not so much. And so sometimes what we find is this, that what Paul's trying to say is that God has made us each for a certain purpose, for certain usage. And don't try to pattern yourself exactly after someone else, because you're too different. In a marriage, in a family, we all have different roles in all of this. And the problem that arises is that if someone doesn't, if I needed, I've cooked and I've got leftovers, and so I need 4 bowls to put up all my leftovers, and I've only got 3. I have to decide, what am I going to do? Is there 2 items that I could put together? And there may be, I can't. It may be that I need 4 separate bowls for those 4 separate items. And if I've only got 3, then I got to take it and throw one of them away, because I don't have anything to put the others in. And so they needed to be different. Not the same. Now, if it was me, and we had things like Brussels sprouts or broccoli, I would have no problem. I would definitely throw them away, because I'm not good. I don't like them. I won't eat them. To others, you like them. They're great. And if you came to my house and I threw them away, you'd be asking me, "Are you stupid? Why are you throwing these away? These are perfectly good, to say to eat." And I'd say, "Okay, then you can take them home with you." And so Paul begins to start helping us to understand these things. And what we need to understand is, when he starts out, he says that that the Lord knows those who are His, and everyone who names the name of the Lord must turn away from unrighteousness. So it's like there are certain people that we all know, and we can name those people. And there are other people that we have no clue who they are. We can't name them. I'm sure that every one of you have probably got some relatives that you probably have heard their name, but you have no idea who they are. somebody's just in a conversation mentioned, oh yeah, Uncle Jack, and you're thinking, okay, who's that? I've heard the name, but I never met him, and I don't know who they belong to. I was visiting my brother-in-law in the hospital, and there was a lady who is my mom's first cousin. So I know her very well because I worked with her at Champion. Well, she had a daughter. I heard the daughter's name, but I'd never met her. So I'm sitting there, or she's sitting there, and I come in, and then my sister introduces me to this individual who knew my sister and him, and I said, oh, okay, I've heard of you. Now who's your mom? And she told me who her mom was. I said, oh, okay, yeah, I know who your mom is. I know your mom very well, and we all, were related to a cousin within our family that I know very well. So I knew that cousin, and I knew her mom, but I didn't know her. And so I really couldn't name her. Well, this is the way with God. When we're a child of God and He's using us, He says He knows us, and He names us. As we were talking this morning in Sunday school, if you go back into the Old Testament, and you'll see it predominantly there, people's names meant something. And it's really wild, because you think about it. When you have a child, how do you choose the child's name? Somebody that you knew, or a name that's popular at the time. But back then, they chose a child's name based upon the attributes of the child. And I don't know about y'all, but when I first laid eyes on my child, I had no idea how that child's going to turn out. You just name them. But yet when you look in the Bible, we use Jacob, for instance. Jacob, you had Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob. And Jacob, his name meant deceiver, liar, cheat. And I don't know about y'all, but I don't think I would want to go around life being known as a liar, a deceiver, and a cheat. But yet, the parents named the individual as soon as he was born based upon his characteristics. And I'm thinking, how in the world do you know that? I mean, God, I understand that, but that's really wild for a child to have to go through life being known as a liar, deceiver, and a cheat. And so when God came to him and spoke to him, He says, "You're no longer going to be called Jacob. From this point forward, you're now going to be called Israel." Is she okay?
Stay there.
Okay. He said, from this point forward, your name will now be called Israel, and which meant God with me, or God's here with me and for me. And so from that point forward, he was no longer known as a liar or a cheat. From this day forward, he's going to be known that God is with him. So his name gets totally changed, by God. Okay? Somebody want to get 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 6 and 7?
For God who commanded the light
to shine out of the darkness that shine in our hearts to get the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us.
So anyway, he says here that God commanded the light to shine out of darkness, and had, it shined it in our hearts. And so the other aspect of this is, have any of y'all ever worked with pottery or clay? Ceramics, yeah. And there are with the ceramics, you'll basically take like a clay and something and mold it into. But with pottery, you basically will put that dab of clay onto like a turning wheel, and then you'll have that wheel just spinning at a certain speed, and then you'll take your hands and get water so that you can take and actually mold and shape that into whatever you want it to be. And so what Paul was using, an illustration there, is that each and every one of us are like a chunk of clay in the hands of God. And God's got this potter wheel and basically puts us on the potter wheel, and then gets his hands like all wet, and then starts molding us and shaping us. And the thing about it is, what sometimes we don't realize is that as he's molding us and shaping us and rounding off some edges that need to be rounded off and some things that need to be changed and stuff, when he steps back after he's finished with all of this, and he makes a look at what he's created, I don't think God ever one time says, boy, this is a piece of junk. I need to take that clay and collapse it and start all over again. Because he knows what he's doing. He knows to every little intricate detail of what he wants that piece to look like. And the amazing part about it, again, is every piece that he makes is totally different than the next person. They're not the same. And what's so fascinating about it is this, that Paul says he takes this vessel, and as he's creating it, he basically will take and shine his light into this that he's making in all of us, and based upon the penetration of the light as to how much it's going to glow and give off. If you think about it, when you first started out a long time ago, maybe you had a candle, and how much light did that give off? Not a whole lot, right? It might help you get a little ways, but if you're not watching where you're going to fall and get hurt. So we go from a candle to basically like a kerosene lantern. Now the kerosene lantern might give you a little bit more light than your candle. But the problem is with the kerosene lantern, or as we call them when I was little, we didn't call them kerosene, we call them coal oil. That stuff would get dirty, and when it would burn, and the inside of that glass got to a point sometimes when you could have a real bright fire going on the inside, but there's nothing penetrating to the outside because it's cake that needs to be cleaned. Then we come to, the incandescent light bulbs that were there, and they were clear, and so they would give off a little light. And so what did they do? They started frosting them. Maybe a bigger wattage, and now you come to an LED light, and then they start giving off, what X amount of lumens, and you can get an LED light, and you can go from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. And each of those will give off a variation of light. Well, that's the same way we are. And this is what Paul's talking about. He says that God, Jesus, will shine his light into each one of us. And based upon certain characteristics of who we are, we're going to give off a lot of light or a little bit of light. And what he's trying to do is to get us to shine the brightest, and as a reflection of who he is. And so this is where Paul is beginning to start talking to us, that there are certain characteristics that we have that God wants us to do. As we were talking this morning, we all live in this world, and there's nothing fair about it at all. It's totally unfair. We get sick. We get robbed. We get this. We get that. If we had our druthers, we would really like God to just stop it all. Make this world perfect, and because this is where I really want to be, is a perfect world. And failing to understand that God's going to do that. He's going to make this place new again. And it's going to be perfect without all of the stuff. And we're going to be able to enjoy what it was meant to be, not what it's become. Because what it's become is not good. And part of that is also because as vessels of God, we've begun to accept things as right that aren't right. He said there would come a time when man would say that good was evil and evil was good. And I think who did I share it with? I was speaking to a bunch of guys yesterday, and I had put out a post out on Facebook about what this one professor was saying. He made a statement that basically a embryo of a child is a cancer, and what happens is that it begins to split and multiply in a out of control way. And what it does is it then becomes almost like a parasite in the body of zapping stuff out of the body. And so my comment on it was, I just said, really? And I've got a nephew who is a nurse, and he wrote and he said, yeah, this is absolutely correct. And I said, I'm telling him, yeah, I understand. If I was to use the definition of a cancer cell, it would be the same thing as a baby. But the problem is they're totally different. a cancer cell doesn't bring life, it kills. Whereas in a child, the multiplication of that is not to bring death, but rather to bring life. And I said, and the problem is, though, that that's what they're teaching in school and in the colleges, but it's filtering its way down. So that it then becomes a way, and if you read in there's a congressman that's in Alabama who is in the state of Alabama representative, who has said that we should just go ahead and kill all the kids. You know, as babies, just go ahead and kill them now, because we're going to kill them later, because they don't have parents, or they don't have this, or they don't have that. And it's thinking, you know, how do you justify this stuff? And yeah, we want to correct it. We want to get something done with it. And we would love for God to do something about it. And He is. And He said He's going to make everything new again. But the problem that has arisen is that the vessels that He has implanted His Holy Spirit in have backed down from telling people, hey, hold on a minute, this is wrong. Just flat out wrong. There isn't anything right about this. Don't know how you justify this. And so he's beginning to tell us we've got a whole bunch of problems, you know, that we end up coming into this issue. So Paul starts talking about a house, but in the same token, we can talk about this in a church. You know, God brings us all here in this family for a reason. You know, and I don't like to use this analogy, but I would always hear growing up, I'm the redheaded stepchild. You heard that used? That was like the outsider of the family, you know. And sometimes what people think is that in a church, they're like the outsider. They're that redheaded stepchild. And God says, no. You know, He says, hey, I brought you here and placed you here for a very specific purpose. Now do it. Nobody else is going to do that job. Nobody else is there in that placement. So learn what it is that you're supposed to do and do it in a family. Growing up, every one of us had different chores. We all didn't have the same one. And as kids, we were taught, you know. Unfortunately, I got stuck with almost all of them sometimes. And that's the bad thing about doing your chores good. If I'd messed up a few times, I think they would have given it to somebody else, you know, to do. And I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. So, but sometimes I think I'm still not smart enough to figure that out. It's like if you mess up long enough, your spouse is going to tell you, no, don't do that, I'll do it. And I'm not bright enough to figure some of that out yet, you know. But so when you begin to start looking at these verses, he starts helping us understand that each vessel is placed in a certain way to do a certain job. And then he starts defining, you know, what some of these things are. Okay. So what you look at here is this. He says to flee from youthful passions. Now there are some things that you do or did or had a desire to do when you were younger. But now that you're older, it's like, I don't really want to do that anymore. You know, it's when we were little, we had a tendency to do hill hopping. I'm smart enough to know now I am not going to go hill hopping. I've seen, a lot of roads when I lived out in the country where people would hill hop, and you would see the asphalt dug up, where the cars had bottomed out, and it's like, no, you don't want to do these things. Hill hopping, yes.
Teenagers get killed that way.
Well, and it causes a lot of issues, that are there. They weren't there. But he said to flee from youthful passions. But here's what he said to do, that as a vessel, he says to pursue righteousness. And so if I was to ask you, what would be righteousness in your definition? Or what would it be to you? Okay. Righteousness is nothing other than pursuing things that will make you like Christ. You always would hear the old saying, what would Jesus do? If Jesus was in this situation, what would he do? Would he talk back to this person, or would he do, get angry, or what would he do? And the issue that arises sometimes is that's hard to do. There are times in the circumstances it's like, yeah, I kind of know what he would do, but I'm not Jesus. And we have some problems, with this, and they always walk in behind me.
Smart.
Huh?
Just Mark.
Oh, it was Mark. Okay, alrighty. So when we'll get done early tonight too. When we are developing who we are, there's also trying a point of developing our character, and that begins to start telling us who we are. What do I stand for? There's the old saying that if you don't stand for anything, or if you don't stand for nothing, then you're going to fall for everything. And there are sometimes you've got to understand, yes, this is something that I need to make a stand for. I can't back down from this. I have to make that stand. And so God begins to start putting those things in our lives. Things that I stand for is there are some teachings that some preachers have that I have a very difficult time with. And when I talk to them or when I listen to them, I'll tell them, I have no clue where you're getting this. You're teaching people this, and I don't see that. Help me understand. And if you can't, then listen to me, and maybe I could get you to understand that there are certain things that just you're not going to convince me to move away from that position. And so we learn to do this in our character. At the end of all of this, he says that we'll pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call, on the Lord from a pure heart, reject foolish and ignorant disputes. Have you ever run into somebody that starts an argument with you, and you just sit there and look at them like, what's the point? I have no clue what this is about, and I have no clue which way this is going. You run into somebody, and you'll look outside, and the sky is blue, except for one little dab of white. And they're going to tell you, boy, it's a miserable day. It's going to rain. It's going to rain, right? Yeah? No.
Yeah.
But there are some people that they just want to argue for the sake of arguing. And it's like, what are we here for? I mean, I know, as I said, my wife and I, we'll be married 47 years on Sunday. And what did I tell you? If you were to ask her how many years, she wouldn't know. I proved my point at lunch. Because she says 40-something. She says, I was young when we got married, and now I'm old. Whatever, But they get a kick out of it. But there were times that we get in an argument over something, and just mad.
Usually nothing.
It's like, okay, I would turn around and I'd ask her, what are we arguing for? She says, why, you don't know? No, I don't. What's the argument here? And she'll say, well, if you don't know, then I'm not going to tell you. It's like,
And she probably doesn't know either.
and most of the time, that's what it is. It's just an argument that's a waste of time. And this is kind of, what he's saying. He says that not to have foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they breed quarrels. And he says, but we must be gentle to everyone. It's like, you can't see me.
When I get to see her like she does this.
I know.
What? No?
I need to start carrying me rubber band guns. But the last part of this, and we'll be done tonight, is he says, listen. He says the disputes, knowing that they breed quarrels, and the slave must not quarrel with the master, but we must be gentle to everyone, able to teach, and patient. And I think that sometimes we've run out of that. We're no longer patient like we should be or could be. Here's what I'd like for you to do to test out how patient that you are. Go shopping at any store. I don't care anymore. It doesn't matter. And generally do it on Thursday at about 5 o'clock. And see how many cashiers. They have got 20 lines at 2 open.
Yep.
And 150 people in there waiting. And I have never heard such language in my life coming out of some of those lines. And then they get up to the front, finally, to check out. And whoever that poor little kid is that is waiting on them, or whoever that poor cashier is, it is like they're beating them up. And they're saying, I'm not the one that decides that there's only 2 cashiers. And I get I used to get, I don't anymore because I know better, but I would get upset with Kroger because Kroger, they open at 5 o'clock in the morning. Best time to shop because they have just restocked the store. And so you can get all kinds of stuff fresh. And you don't have to worry about it's been on the shelf for 2 weeks or whatever, that they rotated it to the front. So you've got all this stuff, and you can go in there. But the problem is they have no cashiers. It's a self-serve. Okay?
Then some of them, I run across this the other day, some of them, the lady says, that one's open there. I went up there and put my item in there. There's only one item. And she said, oh, sir, she said, that's for cards only.
Yep. This one's for cards. It won't take cash.
Yep.
But here's what irritates me. I'll go in there and I'll buy 10 things of one item. And I'll ask them, okay, can you scan that thing and punch in 10? No, you guys scan one at a time. And I said, this is stupid. And they said, well, that's the way it is. And I said, so when does the cashier come in? Well, at 7 o'clock. Well, I'm not coming back at 7 o'clock because at 7 o'clock I gotta have to deal with all of the other people that are in a hurry to go to work. And they're trying to get stuff real quick. I want to get in there before they do. And stuff. And it's like, no wonder people complain about customer service. But if you really want to learn patience, go shopping.
Oh, you can go in a store and be in a certain department and you can't find what you're looking for, or you want to know if they have, you know what, and so you're looking for the person that works in that department. And there's nobody there. So you go look for somebody. So you ask somebody, can somebody help me in this department? And you're waiting forever for them to get somebody. And then they'll say, oh, we don't have anybody working in this department. I don't know anything about this, but they sent me to help you. They don't know where it is either.
And so what God says is that we need to learn how to be patient. And honestly, if we can learn how to be patient, we'll get along a lot better with everybody and each other. It doesn't cause a lot of problems or complaints.
I have trouble with that.
With patience.
Very little.
Probably all do.
But I find as I'm getting older, I'm getting more patient. I got time.
Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come in and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30 with our morning worship. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting, they're fast moving, and everything in our service is just a fast pace. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving, and we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening, and during the school year, we have Awana, and Awana starts with the Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, we also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time. And we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.